of all, thank you to the Vice Mayor. I think that was a terrific setup for this conversation. And thank you all for being here bright and early on a Monday morning. I'm not sure I can conjure up profound this early, but I will do my best. Anyway, as I was saying, you all wouldn't be here if you didn't care about your community and understand the importance of water to California. Its periodic abundance and scarcity is really what drives the way that we live in California, where we live, how we live, what we grow, what we eat, diversity of our wildlife. The one thing about water supply in California is that it is predictably unpredictable. Since the gold rush, Californians have worked hard to flatten out those swings in our Mediterranean climate and get water from place of abundance to place of need. And the work of innovative engineers over the last 100 years has left us with a network of dams and aqueducts that rival the most ambitious on Earth. And that water infrastructure fueled tremendous economic growth in California over the last century. But over the last 50 years, as society's appreciation for the value of the natural environment evolved, much of that infrastructure, restrictions were placed on how it was operated, and today it simply doesn't provide the reliability that it once was expected to provide. In response to that, water users that depend upon supplies that are delivered from across regions and the local governments and agencies that represent them have gone to extraordinary length to improve water supply reliability through measures in their own control, like water conservation or improving groundwater management or adding recycling to their local systems. And that has helped us maintain adequate water supply reliability across the state for the past couple of decades. Today, I think there is a broad recognition that we're not going to meet our future needs by future or additional development of those big water systems that we've built in the last century, but rather the key questions are, how can we improve and operate those systems in a sustainable and reliable way, and what other actions are necessary to provide adequate reliability? So I want to give you a little bit of a backdrop for California water today, talk about my insights as to the purpose and need for Bay Delta conservation in the context of a statewide plan for addressing our water issues, and then touch on some of the regional issues that are so important to us here in Sacramento. As mentioned before, the department I lead, TWR, constructed and operates the State Water Project. It's a 50-year-old network of dams, reservoirs, pumping plants, aqueducts, delivers water across 2/3 of the state of California to 2/3 of its residents. It's one of two big projects that rely upon moving water through the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. The other is the Central Valley Project operated by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The CVP project extends from the Cascade Range to the north to the base of the Tehachapi's in the south, and basically diverts water from several Northern California rivers to farmers primarily in the Central Valley, but also to cities and towns and metropolitan areas, particularly in the Santa Clara Valley. And as you know, one of those key reclamation facilities is Folsom Lake, just 35 miles upstream here on the American River. All of us who live in Sacramento depend upon Folsom for not only flood management, but also providing us water. And farmers many, many miles away in the San Joaquin Valley also depend on Folsom to deliver some of the water supplies that they use to grow their crops and help feed the nation. Like Folsom Lake, all of the major components of the State Water Project and the CVP serve both local needs, excuse me, and statewide needs. And achieving the balance of local needs and statewide needs is often a challenge. And it's most contentious, of course, when the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta is involved. Few parts of California can claim to be disassociated from the Delta. The Delta drains about 40% of the state's land area, 25 million people in California, and 3 million acres of farmland depend upon water supplies that are diverted from the Delta. And of course, it's also the most important ecological estuary in the state. the ecological importance and complexity of that estuary is still boggling to us all, and we're learning more about it every day, but absolutely of vital importance to the state's environment. And overlaying that, of course, are the interests and heritage of the people that live and work in the Delta. So it's understandable that proposed changes are often met with concern and apprehension. And that goes not only for Delta residents, but for folks living upstream of the Delta, folks that are concerned about the Delta environment, and folks that are concerned about costs they might have to pay to make those changes real. Those competing concerns have resulted in gridlock over the last couple of decades. Doing nothing in the Delta is no longer an acceptable option. We have 30 years of experience now with the trends that are pushing species towards extinction in the Delta. And as those native fish populations decline, water deliveries are increasingly interrupted. The Delta is simply too important ecologically and a source of water to allow us to ignore those trends. We don't have 3 decades of experience with climate change, but we know enough to recognize that if we're going to continue satisfying California's needs in the face of rising sea levels, shrunken Sierra snowpack, altered precipitation patterns, there's simply no time to waste, and that's where the Bay Delta Conservation Plan comes in. We're crafting the Bay Delta Conservation to try to reverse these unsustainable trends in the Delta and cope with climate change. There are a lot of preconceived notions about the BDCP. Many in our region see it simply as the tunnels project. It's an assumed threat to Northern California water supplies and the Delta itself. And I drive by the Stop the Tunnels signs in my neighborhood every day, drove by them this morning. Frankly, it's better than a cup of coffee for me, so it gets me up and going. So it's one of the reasons I'm not completely stone dead this morning. The BDCP proposal is big and the stakes are high. It deserves the attention of all Californians, but what I'm asking everyone is to try to cut through the rhetoric and understand what the plan is and what it isn't, and judge it on that basis. The goals of the plan are set forward in the legislature in 2009, twofold: to protect and enhance the estuary that is the Delta, and to stabilize the delivery of water from the Delta. Technically, the Bay Delta Conservation Plan is a habitat conservation plan under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. Years of regulatory and legal struggles over the existing system of governance in the Delta has led us to this ambitious HCP approach. An HCP, by its nature, is fundamentally different, and I think a better way of complying with ESA than the species by species lawsuit approach. That led us to the consensus that the current status quo approach in the Delta is simply not working for anyone. The core strategy here is that by recovering populations of at-risk fish, we can stabilize water project operations and water supply reliability. We released an administrative draft of the plan back this spring to give folks a chance to start to get familiar with it. We've continued to refine the plan, and we'll release a public draft soon. We were scheduled to release that public draft in mid-November. Due to the federal shutdown, we are delayed a bit, but we expect to now have the public draft out probably in mid-December. We'll have a 120-day public comment period, at least a dozen public meetings around the state to gather comments, and we're aiming at the decision on the plan about this time next year. So this is a great time to get engaged in the conversation. The plan aims to help 57 different species over the 50-year life of the permit. There are 22 different conservation measures, which are the sets of actions that the plan will take to achieve its goals. Of course, 2 get the most attention. First of all, we propose to protect or restore about 145,000 acres of habitat in the Delta over the 50-year life of the program. Much of that land would be the tidal wetlands that all but disappeared from the Delta when it was diked and drained starting about 150 years ago. Those tidal wetlands, along with improved habitat along channel margins and seasonally flooded floodplain, should help bolster basic ecosystem functions of the Delta, allowing a more robust food web, more resilient populations of Delta smelt, Chinook salmon, and other protected species. And of course, the BDCP also calls for changing the way that the federal and state water projects pump water from the Delta. The existing South Delta pumps are on dead-end channels where it It's just extremely hard to screen fish. And if you've ever been out to see this operation, it's extraordinary. Fish must be lifted out of the water, placed in trucks, and driven out of the reach of the pumps. And of course, most fish don't survive that handling. The South Delta pumps also pull water across the Delta in an unnatural pattern that's harmful to fish. And ESA restrictions to prevent those unnatural flows, or reverse flows as they're called, has been a significant contributor to the decline of the reliability of the state project and the Central Valley project. So to address this problem, we propose to build 3 intakes on the Sacramento River that could be much more effectively screened, and tunnels to move that water to the existing conveyance facilities in the South Delta. We'd still use the South Delta pumps at times, but a northern division would give us much more flexibility to take water when river flows are high in a way that protects against those reverse flows and reduces the risk to endangered fish. This is the fundamental purpose of improved Delta conveyance, and one that's really important to understand. Fish agencies have been pushing us to reduce South Delta pumping for decades now to minimize those reverse flows and those harmful effects on fish. By adding North Delta diversion capacity, we can operate the water projects much more flexibly and opportunistically. That allows us to provide more protection for fish and still maintain exports. That's how Delta conveyance benefits both fish and water supplies. Of course, many remain concerned about the possible negative effects of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan on upstream regions, and again, understandably given the scale of the project. But the BDCP does not propose actions that change water rights. It's important to understand, and we will continue to reinforce that message. The plan acknowledges and respects California's complex water rights priority system, as well as laws that protect area of origin water rights. And importantly, the BDCP doesn't propose to divert more water from the Delta. Project operations would actually be driven by the 214 biological objectives that are in the plan, but if we are successful, the federal and state water project yield would go up and down by no more than about 10% relative to the historical average of the last 20 years. So why would state water project or CDP contractors consider spending so much money on a project that doesn't significantly increase water supplies? It's a great question, one I think that is met with skepticism. Holding supplies is actually of great value. Trends continue and exports decline. All of the investments and actions that local agencies have taken to improve water conservation, add water recycling to the system, manage their groundwaters better, all goes towards backfilling for lost export supplies. That means you've got a choice in the future of either adding more expensive actions to deal with future challenges, population growth, climate change, or else you deal with water shortages. On August 4th, Mayor Johnson offered up what I thought was a very constructive opinion piece in the Sacramento Bee, and the title was, "State Needs More Water, Not Just Improved Sharing." And the way I read it, the theme was that we need a comprehensive plan that is more than a zero-sum game. I wholeheartedly agree with Mayor Johnson, and I'd offer a friendly amendment. Growing the size of the water supply is an important goal for California. It's a laudable goal. But stopping the trend of a shrinking water pie is our first order of business. And that really is what the Bay Delta Conservation Plan is trying to achieve. One of the other effects of the BDCP planning process is that we've really pushed the envelope in evaluating the effects of climate change on our water systems. And that evaluation is really serving as a wake-up call for us all. Our analysis shows that in the coming decades, we'll more likely, more frequently have the kind of conditions that are capable of depleting our reservoirs, major reservoirs, including Folsom. And without action, that effect is likely to occur with or without the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. The analysis also shows that the Bay Delta Conservation Plan would add flexibility so that project operators can better avoid dead pool conditions. But regardless of BDCP, we have work to do as a community, in concert with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the state of California, to ensure that those dead pool conditions are a rarity, not a standard operating procedure. And I'm very glad that we've begun conversation on this issue, and we need to continue and expand that effort. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan is about stabilizing reliable foundational water supplies for much of California. That would enable water managers in those areas to make more informed decisions about investments in additional water recycling, water conservation, those other actions that we'll need to take to achieve our water supply reliability goals. But we need to take action throughout California to meet our future challenges. Here at home, recent updates to the integrated regional water management plans that encompass the American River Basin and surrounding watersheds indicate that we can expect an increase in water demand of at least 20% by 2030. If we're going to cope with climate change and provide for a growing population, we need diverse local and regional water supply portfolios throughout the state. And all agencies, all water agencies, whether they depend upon the Delta or not, no matter how ample their water supplies have been historically, must consider how conditions are going to change and plan for those changes. At the state level, we've got to continue to help local and regional water agencies invest in water conservation and recycling, and groundwater management, and cleanup of contaminated aquifers, and a host of other projects that will make better use of existing supplies. And we haven't been sitting idle, waiting for a Delta solution to make progress on those fronts. Over the last decade, the state of California has invested about $1.4 billion in general obligation bond funds to help develop new local water projects. That funding has leveraged an additional $3.7 billion in matching local funds. Those projects altogether, we estimate, have enhanced California's water supply by about 2 million acre-feet per year. That's enough for 4 million California families, so it's a significant step forward. We need continued investment in all those tools to meet our future challenges. To sharpen our focus, Governor Brown's administration is currently preparing an action plan, a statewide water action plan for the governor's consideration. Tim Quinn will talk more about Aqua's effort to help us with input into that plan. Our intent is to outline the priority actions the state ought to be focused on for the next 1 to 5 years, to push us forward on all of these fronts, to bring reliability, restoration, and resilience to California's water systems. That includes, of course, stabilizing the Delta, improving our management of groundwater, building new water storage facilities, increasing local self-reliance, streamlining voluntary water transfers, and expanding funding for projects that provide multiple benefits, such as flood control, improved water quality, and ecosystem restoration. We're working hard on that plan now, in concert with a number of different interests, including Aqua, and we intend to unveil that plan in the next couple of months. So in conclusion, our challenges are clearly great. I think one of our first and foremost challenges is getting the broader public to understand the magnitude of the issues that we have to face. For most of California, as long as water continues to run out the tap, there's no problem. And clearly, we're forecasting significant issues, and we need the public to understand what those issues are and to get engaged. So I salute you all for being here to begin that conversation. We all have a role to play in this significant effort. Federal, state, local, working together, our collective efforts will strengthen California as a whole. So thank you very much for your attention today.